I don't know what your impression of the book of Leviticus is. I suspect that most Christians who even think about the book of Leviticus imagine that it is mostly for priests, that it's a book full of rules, and it really doesn't apply to Christians. And yet, the New Testament, in fact, does draw from the book of Leviticus. Jesus pretty famously drew a line or two from the book of Leviticus that's recorded in the New Testament. Now, I've picked out a couple of verses that you may find familiar. Perhaps they remind you of something that Jesus said. This is Leviticus 19, verses 17 and 18. And what I want you to see is that the first verse there is, while it's in the negative, do not hate your brother in your heart, it's reflected in the last phrase there. Rather, love your neighbor as yourself. So you have a negative and a positive injunction that basically says what you're supposed to do, the way you're supposed to treat your brother, your neighbor, is to love them. Love them in your heart, the way that you even love yourself. In the middle, we have two phrases that clarify what it means to love your neighbor. The first one says to rebuke your neighbor frankly, so that you will not carry sin because of him. That is, rebuke someone you love so that you won't encourage sin by saying nothing. You don't want to draw that sin on yourself. And the negative of that, don't take revenge on or bear a grudge against any of your people. Don't sin by the way that you treat your brother whom you are trying to rebuke. And the end of this is, here's the explanation, I am Yahweh. So that's why you do what you do. That's why you are to love your neighbor, love your brother, rather than bearing a grudge or taking vengeance. I don't know if you saw the movie Wonder Woman. My wife and I did, and it was, it's exciting, good CGI. It was noisy in places. I'm old. But what intrigued me about it was that towards the end, the protagonist will declare that love is, in fact, the answer, that the way to overcome evil is through love. Now, this is a bit ironic because, well, okay, if you haven't seen the movie and you want to see the movie and you don't want to have things spoiled for you, but stick your fingers in your ear or, mute your computer or whatever for a moment. I'll hold up my hand when I'm finished talking about the movie. What's ironic is that the protagonist actually defeats her brother, Ares, by destroying him. And she uses the same kind of power as he had used against her. So she says that love is the way to conquer evil, but the way that she acts is by using evil to conquer evil. You heard the phrase, you have to fight fire with fire. And maybe that phrase came from the firefighting technique of burning ahead of the fire, burning some, there's my hand there, burning the brush that's in front of a fire so that the main fire won't have any fuel to feed on and it'll die out. Maybe that's how you fight fire with fire. But the reality is that you fight fire with water. And in our personal relations, it's ridiculous to think that we fight evil with more evil. We fight hatred with more hatred. That's not the way that it works. According to Leviticus, the way that you deal with sin is with love. Love your neighbor. Love your brother. That's the way that you rebuke him without bringing sin onto yourself. Does this sound familiar to you? Maybe Leviticus is not so bad after all.